Girl collapses, shaking from the cold. A millionaire rushes to help her, but what falls from her pocket shatters him. She hit the ground like a rag doll. No strength, no sound, just a dull thud against the cold cement. No one screamed. No one. Or ran just her lying still in the shadows of early morning, until a man pulled over, rushed out of his car, and the world stopped for him. His hands hesitated as they touched her small, stiff body. She was trembling. Her fingers were purple, her lips cracked, her eyes tightly shut, as if trying to dream of warmth. She was far too small. So thin, she looked like she had no bones, just skin and fear. She was curled up in front of a closed bakery like she hoped the smell of bread would be enough to survive. But then he saw it. Something slipped from the torn pocket of her coat. A folded piece of paper. Old. He picked it up instinctively, and when he unfolded it, his chest sank. It was him. Smiling, young, with sunlight on his face. Beside him was the woman he hadn't seen in over a decade, and in her arms, a baby. His heart began to pound. That photo looked like it had been torn from another lifetime, one he had spent years trying to forget. But why would a homeless child have that picture? No, he whispered, as if the air had turned to ice. The girl made a faint noise, like a muffled whimper. He knelt beside her, trying to warm her with his own body, eyes still locked on the photo. It didn't make sense. He knew that picture well. It had been taken the day they decided to run away to the countryside, before everything fell apart. But that baby, it couldn't be the same girl. Could it? And just then, everything shattered. The girl opened her eyes, and she looked at him. Like she knew him. He flinched a little. Her gaze, it wasn't just any look. It was familiar. Like she saw something in him no one else could. Like she'd seen him 1,000 times before, in distant memories or stubborn dreams, and worst of all, she didn't look scared or surprised. She looked sad. Sad for him. "Are you okay?" he asked, trying to sound calm, but his voice cracked. She just closed her eyes again, as if that moment was enough, as if the cold didn't matter anymore. And deep down, he knew he couldn't leave her there, but there was something he still didn't know, something that would make everything else in his world seem small. He lifted her in his arms, and as he walked toward the car, he felt the weight of a truth he hadn't yet learned, but that was already crushing him. The weight of a life he thought he'd buried, coming back to collect. He drove without knowing exactly where. His hands on the steering wheel shook even more than the girl in his arms. The heater was blasting, but the cold he felt came from inside. A cold that no warm air or time could thaw. She was curled up asleep in the passenger seat, wrapped in his coat, her face half hidden, the photo still tucked in the jacket pocket. He couldn't bring himself to move it. Not yet. His name was Michael, and on the outside he was everything you'd expect from a successful man. Italian tie, luxury electric car, an apartment with an ocean view, and contract signed with gold pens. But on the inside Michael was a decorated ruin. Beautiful, but empty. 15 years ago he left, walked away from the woman, walked away from everything. After his father died, he couldn't bear the weight of trying to be someone anymore. He quit his job, vanished from the city, erased his tracks, burned the photos, including that one. But she, the woman in the photo, had kept a copy. And apparently, so had the baby. Only he hadn't known. He hadn't known she was pregnant. Hadn't known that baby had grown up, and now, by the look of it, was sleeping beside him, cold, dirty, starving. The traffic light turned red. He stopped, looked over. The girl was still trembling, even in her sleep. One of her hands was clenched, tightly like she was holding onto something invisible. And then, he heard it, a low hoarse sound from deep in her throat. A name. Amy. He froze. That was her mother's name. Amy. The woman he'd left behind. His chest tightened in a way he hadn't felt in years. He remembered that voice. Sweet, steady, always so full of life. Amy laughed with her eyes, laughed even when everything seemed impossible. And now that name came from the lips of a freezing child, like an echo of everything he had destroyed. He hit the gas. He had to get her to a hospital. But something inside him said that wasn't all she needed. She needed more than doctors. She needed history. She needed answers. And he, for the first time in years, needed to tell the truth. But there was still something he didn't know. When he pulled up to the nearest private clinic, the girl opened her eyes again. They looked dull, like they were fighting to stay in this world. But she spoke, softly, like someone reciting a phrase they'd held onto for too long. "My mum said he was scared of me. That's why he left." Michael froze. She was talking about him. I always thought she was lying. But then one day she cried, and I knew it was true. She didn't cry, just said it, like a tired prayer. And he, frozen at the door handle, had no words, because it was true. He had run, because he was afraid to be a father, afraid he wouldn't know how to love the right way. And now he was here in front of the daughter he'd never met, hearing the pain he had left behind as his legacy. But in that moment, the world turned again. A nurse ran out from the reception desk and rushed. The girl inside. Michael stayed back, hands shaking as he filled out forms. Child's name? He didn't know. Date of birth? No idea. Mother's name? Amy? Just Amy. He wrote it down as if each letter was an apology. The nurse asked him to wait, and he sat there for over an hour, until a voice came from the glass door. "Sir, you said you're her father?" Michael stood slowly. The doctor looked at him seriously. "Why do you ask?" "Because we found something on her. Something you should probably see." In the center of the white room, under the cold glare of overhead lights, the girl lay asleep, hooked up to wires and monitors, her face still pale, eyes closed like the doors of an abandoned house. The doctor returned with a sealed envelope and an expression heavier than the news he was about to deliver. "We found this sewn into the lining of her jacket, hidden but close to her heart." He handed over the envelope. Michael opened it slowly. Inside were several folded pages, yellowed papers with childish drawings and a few words written in shaky handwriting. But among them, there was a letter, handwritten by Amy. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Those curved, delicate strokes, he would recognize them anywhere. The letter began with a name he hadn't seen in years, Lena, the girl's name. "If you're reading this, my daughter, it's because the world was too cruel, because there wasn't enough time. But I tried, I swear I tried. The man in the photo is your father. He left before he knew you existed, not out of hate, out of fear. I never wanted you to hate him. I just wanted you to know that for a moment, the three of us were a family, and that moment, it was beautiful." Michael's knees buckled. He sank into the chair beside her bed. That wasn't just a letter. It was a bridge between two broken worlds. Amy hadn't hated him. More than that, she had tried to keep alive, inside their daughter, the memory of a love he himself had buried. But then, he noticed something at the bottom corner of the letter. A date, 2018. Amy's signature, still firm, and below it, a note written in a different hand. The girl's. "She left in the winter. I didn't know where to go, so I looked for you. Lena had looked for him. It wasn't a coincidence. She carried that photo and that letter like compasses, and even sleeping on the street, even without knowing where he was, she never gave up. He wanted to ask everything: where she had slept, who had hurt her, how she had survived. But what crushed him most was the silence, what she didn't say, what she had lived through alone. The nurse came in, said she would wake up soon, but asked him not to say anything too sudden. "She's emotionally very fragile," she warned. Michael nodded, but inside he was the one in pieces. When Lena opened her eyes again, she saw the white ceiling and the light filtering through the window. She turned her head. "He was there, I read the letter," Michael said, his voice low. She turned away as if that was answer enough, and maybe it was. "I didn't know about you, Lena, I swear. But now you do." Silence. Cold. A canyon between two words. "Why? Did it take you so long?" The question cut deep. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she just asked. Like someone who deserves an answer but no longer expects justice. Because I didn't know how to come back. I didn't have the courage. I had nothing to offer you. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to know if you were real. Michael reached out to touch her hand, but she pulled away slightly. That hurt more than any scream. It was the first wall, the cruelest one. And then she said, eyes steady, "My mom died angry at the world, but never at you. Don't destroy that too." He didn't respond, because in that moment, he understood the depth of the pit he'd have to climb out of to reach her. But there was still something he didn't know, something time alone wouldn't heal. The next day, the sunlight didn't warm the hospital window. It was winter in the US, but inside Lena, the cold came from somewhere else. Michael brought new clothes, books, even a pair of sneakers with little lights that blinked when you walked. Kid stuff. But Lena wasn't a kid. Not in that way. She looked at everything in silence, then turned her face to the wall. "You think you can buy forgiveness with gifts?" Michael took the hit without armor. He sat beside her without trying to explain. "No, I don't. But it's what I do when I don't know what to say." She let out a soundless laugh. It wasn't sarcasm. It was exhaustion. In the days that followed, he stayed at the hospital, slept in a hard armchair, head resting on the window. Sometimes he'd wake up startled, thinking it was all a dream. But it wasn't. Lena was there, and every morning she ignored him was a fresh blade to his conscience. But then, one morning she wasn't in the bed. Panic hit instantly. He called the nurse. She didn't know. No one knew. Michael ran through the hallways until he saw a small silhouette in the playroom, alone, drawing. When he walked in, she hid the paper. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, still breathless. "I just wanted to be alone with her for a while," Lena replied, pointing at the drawing. He got closer. It was a woman with long hair, smiling. Amy. She had drawn her in detail, details Michael's memory barely held onto. "You remember her smile that clearly?" Lena nodded but didn't smile. "I close my eyes and picture her face every night before I sleep, so I don't forget." Michael knelt beside his daughter, looked at the drawing like someone looking into a broken mirror. "Can I keep this?" "No." "It's my shield." Another no, another wall. Over the week he tried everything, talked about himself, told stories from when he was young, how he met Amy. But Lena listened in silence. Sometimes she would ask piercing questions, like she was testing if the wound still hurt. "Did you love her?" "Very much." "Then why did you leave?" The question always came in different forms, but the answer was always the same. A silence wrapped in guilt. One day he brought an envelope. Inside a revised birth certificate, for the first time her name with his last name. "This is yours if you want it." Lena took the paper, looked at it for a long time, then folded it and placed it under the pillow. Neither acceptance nor rejection. But in that instant everything changed. A social worker appeared at the door. He wanted to speak with Lena, assess for signs of abandonment, emotional risk, or custody viability. Michael froze. He wasn't ready to lose the little ground he had started to gain. "I want to go with him," Lena said, before the interview even began. The social worker looked at him, surprised. Michael could hardly believe it. But she added, "For now." That was it. A maybe, a slightly open door, but to him it meant everything. "Are you sure?" the social worker asked. "I'm sure, just don't leave me alone if he disappears again." Michael felt the words like a sentence, but also like a tiny vote of trust, yet there was still something he didn't know. A decision was coming. And it would demand everything from him. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to leave a like. The new house was too quiet for a girl, too big for two strangers. Michael tried to adjust it, took down old paintings, boxed up the wine bottles, cleaned out corners time had forgotten. But Lena didn't take up space. She walked like she was apologizing, slept like she was afraid to dream. In the first week, she hardly spoke. The food went cold on her plate, her drawings piled up beside the bed, and every silence from her felt like a wall being built between them. Michael, on the other hand, talked, maybe too much, told jokes, Stories from his youth, random absurdities from adult life. Tried to build a bridge, but she never laughed. At most, she'd glance sideways, like someone measuring the distance to their next disappointment. And then he entered the room without knocking. It was automatic. He didn't mean to invade, just wanted to bring her some hot chocolate. But what he saw froze him. Lena was sitting on the floor, tearing her drawings one by one, slowly, with rage, with pain. "Hey, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I can't forget," she said, her voice hoarse. "And you just sit there, trying to make everything seem pretty." Michael grabbed a falling piece of paper. It was a drawing of her mother. "It hurts, I know. You don't know, you ran from the pain." He said nothing. She stared at him, eyes glossy but dry. "Do you know what it's like to hold the hand of someone you love and while they stop breathing?" Michael swallowed hard. He didn't know. I held her hand. She was coughing up blood, and she told me to run. Said the world would swallow me whole if I stayed. But I stayed. Until the very last second. She stood up, throwing the torn pieces onto the bed, and then I walked for days without knowing where you were, just with this photo. She pulled out the crumpled paper. "Just this. And even then, you still doubt me." "I don't doubt you," he said, voice trembling. "Yes, you do. You look at me like you're waiting for a lie. Like you think you can buy love with a birth certificate or a new doll." She took a deep breath, then said the sentence that shattered him. "I thought finding you would heal me, but all it did was give me another wound." Michael didn't try to argue, because it was true. He didn't know how to love the right way. He never had. And she carried all the consequences of that. "I'm sorry." She didn't reply. She left the room, and for the first time she slammed the door, but in that moment, everything came crashing down. Michael got a call. It was from the hospital. The social worker had cross-checked Lena's mother's records with older files. There was a letter, a legal document signed by Amy, a formal request for future custody assigned to someone else. "She wanted a friend of hers to have guardianship," said the voice on the other end of the line. Michael froze. But why? Maybe she didn't believe you'd ever show up. Or maybe she didn't want to risk it. The document was valid, and the woman had already been contacted. He hung up without knowing what to feel. Lena's pain wasn't just about being abandoned. It was also about what her mother had decided. She hadn't trusted that he would come back, and now the court was about to decide whether Lena would stay with him or be handed over to a stranger. When he walked into her room, he saw the suitcase on the bed. "You don't have to go," he said, desperate. "It's not really my choice, is it?" She was calmer now, but distant, like her mind was already somewhere else. "Lena, I messed up, but I'm here now, and if you let me, I'll prove it. Every single day." She finally looked at him, her eyes holding something between anger and hope. "Prove it tomorrow. But if you don't show up, I never want to see you again." Michael nodded, but he knew time was running out to prove anything at all. The next morning, the sun rose cold, and for the first time in years, Michael was afraid to open his eyes. He had promised Lena he'd be there, that he'd show up, but he didn't know how. Her suitcase was still in the living room. The custody paperwork sat on the table, and the clock was ticking. He made pancakes, left milk on the table, put her coat on the back of the chair, but she didn't come downstairs. He climbed the stairs. Slowly, breath caught in his chest. Her door was slightly ajar, empty. The bed was made, the closet open, the suitcase gone, and in that moment, everything fell apart. On the pillow, there was a note. 4 lines, written in shaky but determined handwriting. "You don't need to prove anything. I already understand. I'm going with her. I don't want to grow up waiting. Goodbye." Michael stood there for minutes, maybe hours. The paper trembled in his hands, but he couldn't let go, because letting go meant accepting it was over, and he wasn't ready. He ran, got in the car, drove straight to the address listed in the custody paperwork, rang the doorbell without thinking. A gray-haired woman opened the door, surprise in her eyes. "Is she here?" was all he could say. The woman nodded. Behind her, in the hallway, Lena appeared with a backpack on her shoulders. She wasn't crying, She just looked at him with that same expression from the hospital, sadness for him. "You didn't come," she said. I was trying. I made breakfast. I waited. But you didn't come." He stepped forward, but she stepped back. The woman placed a gentle hand on Lena's shoulder. "All I want is for her to have peace," the woman said. "And time," Michael wanted to shout, to say he could be better, that he wouldn't run. But he didn't have any emotional credit left, only promises, and Lena didn't live on those anymore. She turned away and walked inside. The door closed, and the sound of the lock echoed like a verdict. That night, Michael returned home and opened the drawer where he kept memories. Old photos, the wedding ring, a pair of baby shoes Amy had bought when she found out she was pregnant. He picked them up and collapsed to the floor. He cried for the first time since his father died, cried like a child, for his daughter, for the woman, for himself, for everything he didn't know how to be, everything he'd tried to bury. And then the phone rang. It was the hospital. The child psychologist Lena had seen before her release. Her voice was tense. "Mr. Michael, I'm sorry to call this late, but I thought you should know. Lena talked about a place, a hiding spot, a park. A park. She said she'd go there if the world ever became too much again." He hung up without a second thought, threw on his coat, and ran out the door. The park was near the hospital, small, surrounded by leafless trees, a bench covered in dead leaves. When he arrived, there was no one. He wandered through the rusted playground equipment, heart pounding, empty. He almost gave up. But then he saw the drawing, tucked under a rock. It was Amy again, but this time she was holding a child and smiling at a man. It was him. Next to the drawing, scribbled in shaky letters, "If you still want to try, I'll come back tomorrow." Michael dropped to his knees. The cold bit deep. But for the first time in a long while, there was something beyond the pain. A promise. The next morning, Michael arrived at the park before sunrise. The air was thick with fog, and the bare branches of the trees scratched the pale sky like sloppy stitches. He sat on the same bench where he'd found the drawing, hands buried in his pockets, eyes scanning every corner of the park. He waited for hours. Mothers passed with strollers, teens with headphones, a man walking a dog off leash, but no Lena. He began to doubt. Maybe she wouldn't come back. Maybe the drawing was just a parting gift. But then she appeared. She walked slowly, backpack on her shoulders, wearing a scarf he recognized. It was Amy's. She moved like someone unsure if they were welcome, like she was showing up on the outside, but still guarded on the inside. Michael stood but didn't approach. He waited. Let her choose the distance. Lena stopped a few feet away, then, without a word, sat on the other end of the bench. A heavy silence fell between them. "I came," she said after a while. "I know," he replied quietly, "but not because I forgave you. Just because I wanted to see if you'd still be here." He nodded. "Fair. I've been here since before the sun came up." She glanced at him. For the first time, there was no resentment in her eyes, just exhaustion. "What would you have done if I hadn't shown up? Stayed until dark, then come back tomorrow." She picked up a dry twig from the ground and began tracing invisible shapes in the dirt. "The lady taking care of me, she said you looked lost, but that sometimes lost people just want to be found." Michael took a deep breath. It sounded like a question in disguise. "I don't know if I deserve to be found, Lena, but I know I want to find you, not just as your father, as someone who needs to learn who you are. The right way." She stopped drawing, stared at the ground. "I like to draw because it's the only way I can say things I don't know how to speak. I saw your drawing and it saved me yesterday." She pulled a sketchbook from her backpack. It was new. She cleared a space on the bench between them and opened it, picked up a pencil, and without looking at him said, "Describe me. How you see me." Michael hesitated, then began, "You have your mother's eyes, but not her look. Yours are deeper, older, Like you've lived more than you should have. You walk like you measure your steps, like someone who's had to run from too much. And you speak like you choose every word so it won't hurt anyone, not even yourself." She drew silently. The pencil moved quickly. When she finished, she turned the sketchbook toward him. It was a portrait, not of him, of herself. But there was a detail. In the background, a man sitting, looking at her with a cracked smile. It was him, but smaller. More human, and above them both a cloud with a phrase inside, "Sometimes the ones who fall are the ones who want to rise the most." Michael couldn't hold back the tears, but he didn't try to hide them. Lena looked at him, and for the first time she smiled, a timid smile, but real. "Are you still afraid of me?" she asked. "No, I'm afraid of failing you. But afraid of you? Never." She closed the sketchbook, stood up. "Then prove it, but not with words." "With what?" With time. He stood too. They were side by side. No hugs, no promises. But something new was there, a kind of warmth, as if winter was finally starting. "To back off, you want to come home?" She hesitated. "I want to go somewhere that might become home someday." Michael nodded and reached out his hand. Lena looked at it for a second, then took it, fragile, but firm. But in that moment, his phone rang, and the voice on the other end wasn't the social worker. It was his lawyer. And what he said threatened everything again. They sat in the car, Michael at the wheel, Lena staring out the window. The silence between them was no longer a wall. It was a bridge under construction. "What is it?" she asked, still facing the window. Michael took a while to answer. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, and the city felt farther away than it really was. "They want to move up the custody hearing," he said. "They said the judge might rule without hearing you. Your mum's documents carry a lot of weight." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, almost in a whisper. "What if I say I want to stay? It might not be enough, but maybe it will." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over to the radio and turned the dial. A song started playing, one Michael didn't know, but she hummed along softly. For the first time, the sound in the car wasn't just the engine. In the days that followed, they began sharing a routine. Lena started school, for real, for the first time. Michael picked her up at the gate even when it rained. At night, they cooked together. Rice, chicken, sometimes a pie attempt. They always laughed when something burned, and it almost always did. She painted. He watched. Sometimes he asked what a color meant or a shape. Other times he just observed in silence. He learned more by watching than by speaking. But then she brought home an envelope from school. "It's for parents or guardians," she said, handing it to him without looking. Michael opened it. It was an invitation to an art show. Selected students only. Lena was one of them. "Will you be there?" The question wasn't simple. It had echoes. "If I'm not, you can draw me as a ghost." She smiled. That was enough. That week, Michael took Lena to see the studio where he used to record business podcasts. He showed her the microphones, the sound panels, the lights. She looked at everything with wide, curious eyes. "Can I record something?" "Of course." "About what?" She thought for a moment. About someone who thought she was alone, but found out. Sometimes, pain doesn't get the last word. He recorded her. Her voice was steady, calm. Michael listened to that recording 5 times that night, but just when it seemed like the ground was finally steady, everything collapsed again. An official letter arrived, a summons to court. The woman who had cared for Lena would also attend, and at the top, highlighted in bold, possible final custody decision. Michael didn't show Lena right away, but she noticed. "Is it about me?" He nodded. The truth between them no longer needed filters. What if the judge says, "I can't stay with you," he thought, then answered, "Then we'll start again. Somewhere else. Another time, but never far from each other." The night before the hearing, Lena left a gift on his bed. A notebook with a blue cover. Inside, on the first page, one sentence. "If life is made of chapters, I want you to write the next one with me." Michael couldn't hold it in. He went to her room, knocked. She opened the door in pajamas, her eyes sharp, alert. "Can I come in?" "You can." He sat on the edge of her bed, held up the notebook. "I want to write this chapter, Lena." and the next ones, and all the ones after. Then promise me one thing, anything. If I have to leave tomorrow, don't forget me. Impossible. She nodded and rested her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that, in silence. Two tired bodies. Two souls under repair. But there was still something she didn't know. Something the judge was about to reveal. Something that would change everything. The courtroom felt colder than the winter outside. Grey walls, hard benches, voices too, low to truly understand. Michael held Lena's hand, but she didn't look at him. She was focused on the door ahead, where the judge would soon appear. It wasn't fear on her face, it was something heavier, like she knew everything could change from this point on, forever. The woman who had taken care of her was also there, sitting, hands folded in her lap. She didn't smile, but she wasn't hostile either. She just waited, as if fulfilling a responsibility. When the judge entered, Lena squeezed Michael's fingers. It was subtle, but strong enough for him to feel. She didn't want to let go. We've called this extraordinary hearing to evaluate the custody status of the minor, Lena S. Wilkes, the judge began, flipping through the documents. Michael swallowed hard. The lawyer next to him kept a neutral face, but his knee was shaking under the table. After reviewing the documentation, including the letter from the biological mother, the social worker's assessment, and statements from involved guardians, this court acknowledges the presence of conflicting elements, but also clear signs of an emerging emotional bond between the minor and Mr. Michael Wilkes. A faint murmur moved through the room. Lena remained still. However, there is new information recently added to the file, the judge said, holding up a page. A recording submitted by the minor herself, via the school, in which she states, in her own words, her wish to remain with her biological father despite the emotional risks. Michael turned to Lena, stunned. She simply nodded. "What was that?" he whispered. "That recording at the studio. I asked them to send it. I just didn't tell you. Why? Because you needed to hear it like everyone else from the outside, and then..." The judge spoke again. "Considering all presented evidence, this court finds that the final decision must prioritize the emotional well-being of the child." Michael held his breath. So did Lena. Therefore, this judge rules. Temporary custody shall be converted to full legal custody in favor of Michael Wilkes, under psychological supervision and biannual review. The bond between father and daughter is hereby protected by law. Silence. Then Lena turned to Michael, and for the first time hugged him for real, not like someone saying goodbye, but like someone finally finding home. He held her tight, inhaled the scent of her hair, heard the rush of her heartbeat. She was small, she was his, and she was there, not out of obligation, but by choice. But in that moment, the woman across the room stood up, the lady who had taken care of Lena. She walked over slowly. "Take care of her," she said. "Amy asked me that once. I failed, don't you?" Michael nodded, eyes full. "Thank you. For everything. She's strong, but even the strong need shelter." As they walked out of the courtroom, the world felt new. Lena walked with lighter steps. She said nothing. Michael didn't either. But the silence between them now was peace. In the car, she turned on the radio. It was the same song from the recording. Slow but full of hope. "Are you ready to write the next chapter?" she asked, still looking out the window. "I'm ready to write a whole book with you." She smiled, and through the glass, the sun finally broke through the clouds. But there was still something Michael didn't know, something Lena kept tucked deep in her backpack, and would reveal the next day, changing forever how he saw his daughter. The next morning felt different. It wasn't just the clearer sky or the softer wind. It was the way Lena came down the stairs, barefoot, alert eyes, holding something close to her chest. Michael was in the kitchen making pancakes, the same ones she had refused to eat on their first morning together. Now the smell filled the house with a new kind of memory. She stopped in the doorway, watching silently, then walked to the table and placed what she was holding in front of him, an old cardboard box worn at the edges. The name Lena written in red marker on the lid. "What is this?" he asked, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Something from my mom. She said I should only open it when I felt safe." Michael sat beside her. Lena carefully lifted the lid. Inside were pieces of a childhood, An old pacifier, photos with hand-drawn borders, a cassette tape, 2 folded notes, and 1 drawing. A drawing Michael recognized instantly. It was the house he and Amy had once dreamed of building. An open field, a porch with flowers, a child playing out front. Amy had always said it would be a girl, and it was. Lena picked up one of the notes and read it aloud. If one day you ever feel like there's no space in the world for you, remember, you were made from love. And love doesn't disappear, it only changes form. Her eyes were full, but steady. I kept this as armor, but now, I think it can be a bridge. Michael picked up the other note. It was for him. Michael, if you're reading this, it means she found you. And if she found you, it's because you let yourself be found. Be what I couldn't be for her. Hand, don't disappear. Not ever again. He couldn't say anything. He just pressed his forehead against hers, eyes closed. Lena placed her hand on his arm. It wasn't a fragile gesture. It was an anchor. Then, she pulled out a small, old radio from the box. A cassette player, worn but intact. I think it still works, she said with a crooked smile. Michael found an adapter and plugged it in. The tape began to spin. A voice came through, shaky but alive. Amy, singing a lullaby, a melody that had never rocked the two of them, until now. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. I used to listen to this when it was too cold. When I was too scared. Now, I think I can listen just because I miss her. Michael wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat there, listening, as the lullaby echoed through the house, filling all the spaces that had once been empty. A few days later, they visited a piece of land for sale just outside the city. Michael didn't say anything. He just handed her a blank notebook. It's for drawing the house, the one in our future. Lena opened to the first page. She started with the roof, then the windows, the flowers, and last, 2 figures on the porch, him and her, and a dog they never had but already loved. Does this house have a name? Michael asked. She thought for a moment. Return. Why? Because everything we love eventually finds its way back. Michael smiled, and in that moment, he understood. Love isn't about never leaving. It's about having the courage to come back, and to stay. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in orange and gold. In the background, Amy's lullaby still played, as if time had stopped being the enemy. Lena held the notebook like a map, and he didn't need to run anymore. Now they had a place to belong, even if that house was still only paper and hope, because at last they had each other. Thank you for making it to the end, but don't go just yet. On the screen beside you is another powerful story waiting for you. Click it, subscribe to the channel, and share this moment. I'll be waiting for you there.